session for today. It is automation, obsession, and innovation. So those who would like to continue, please hang on there. This session is being taken by the presenter is Gopal S. Akshintala. He is with us today. Welcome, Gopal. Gopal is a lead software engineer at Salesforce working on scaling backend systems for Revenue Cloud. He actively engages in the dev community through his blog post, international talks, and social media, and he is very active in open source also. He has authored an open source validation framework for JVM, Vader. He loves being on stage. I know he's a very good singer, a tech speaker. He has been talking in many of our TPL APAC events, and he writes about nature and life. So we'll get started in a minute while others are also just getting joining in. I hope you can hear us very clearly. If not, let us know. And for the folks who are joining in, please take the headsets and then power it on so that you can listen to us clearly. There will be other engagement activities happening in the other side. I hope it is not distracting you and you are able to hear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. So welcome, Gopal, and then handing it over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible? Hey, thanks everyone for coming today. So today I'm going to talk about the obsessions we had at Revenue Cloud and how we solve them. As I say, nothing stays forever in life, and the same applies to our code base as well. The developers switch teams, they even switch organizations, and even the script docs that we create easily get outdated. The very code base get handed over to a different team over a period of time. So nothing stays constant with our code base. But there's one thing that actually stays forever. That is the test automation that we write. All those unit tests and F tests, they latch onto a code base and then make sure that the code behaves as expected. They guard them all the time so that nobody breaks that behavior. And that is the prominence of those unit tests and F tests that we keep writing on a day-to-day basis. But it's also one of the reasons why Salesforce is coverage obsessed organization. So this is a great quote. I'm not sure if it's Abraham Lincoln who said this, but give me 6 hours and I'm gonna give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. So it's not enough to be obsessed, but also equally important to introspect. What is the sort of effort that we're putting into sharpening those tools that are used to write something as important as test automation? So unfortunately, today the code metric, the coverage metric that we have is only used for statement coverage, which exactly doesn't depict the behavior coverage of a code basis. And that to me is like a loophole. And like in society, like anything, a loophole combined with an obsession leads to a lot of shady tools and bad practices where you cut corners. So I know one such back when I joined in Salesforce around 2018 or something. I was given a task to improve our test coverage, and I sort of googled around and even explored other modules in our core just to check how the tests are written. And I came across this very intriguing tool called PowerMock. So PowerMock really made me feel powerful. I was really able to bend my bytecode, the prod code to make my test pass. Even without testing any behavior, I was able to achieve like 100% test coverage. I was able to, I really became a pro. And because of all the dark powers that this PowerMock gives me, I was able to stub and, mock whatever I want and really doesn't have to think about how my code is designed. So back then, if KGF is released, I would have been called a PowerMock trophy. So that is the level of proness that I've achieved with PowerMock. But not after very long, we got more requirements to extend our code and sort of we had to refactor as well. And this is how it felt like with all those PowerMock unit tests I have. So because those tests were latching onto my code with all those when-then statements, and they're giving me any breather to even move a single line of code. Every line I change is like breaking 10 tests. So that sort of is a situation where I understood that PowerMock is just a painkiller. But what is the actual pain? It's interacting with the legacy components. So we, Salesforce, has a great legacy of code base that we carry around from early 2000s. We have so many components that we still interact with even today, like the RDB, entity object accessor. Anybody who is relevant to code development would understand what I mean. And I'm sure we're going to do it going forward as well. They are like the four core pillars of our code. But those core components weren't really designed with tests in mind. So the moment you interact with it, as I say, if you interact with legacy code base, your code instantly turns legacy. So what happens is your code also suffers the same problems that legacy code has, and you suffer testability as well. But there is, how do you mitigate this? There is a small catch in here. So if you directly interact with these legacy components, you sort of suffer with these problems. But how do you indirectly interact with it? And that brings me to this awesome architecture we sort of adapted around 236 called ports and adapters. And we really got obsessed with this architecture because it sort of helped us breeze through tests. Let me take a crash course, very quick crash course of what this is. Imagine this is for domain logic and you're directly doing a side effect or interacting with DB by making using this legacy component like let's say a DB entity object.save or something. That poses a problem for the test to execute that code because it's legacy component, it doesn't let you mock easily. You have to use all those dark powers coming with power mock. And that sort of makes it difficult to write tests, and you sort of end up writing tests that latches your code base as we discussed. But this is how we solve by adding a small level of interaction that is a port. A port is nothing but a Java interface on which your domain logic depends on, maybe to a concept or something. And then you have an adapter, two adapters like which are just implementations of that interface. One actually doing the real domain DB layer. It's very loud out there. Very loud out there, is that? Yeah, I'm not able to hear my own voice. Okay, and there's a fake adapter which sort of dummies out. So how we solve it is you should be able to dependency inject them depending on the context that you have. So if you're running a test, you would use a fake adapter which replaces that port, and then you can focus on testing the domain logic in isolation. I know there's a very brief crash course. There's so much about this architecture. I would request you to go explore more about it. But we sort of got obsessed because we sort of saw a lot of reusable components that we across sales core development, Salesforce core that we can reuse. Like omnipresent operators like DB, DB operators, a lot of stuff that we could reuse. So we spawned a ports and adapters toolkit called Loki. Loki is nothing but a bunch of adapters that you can reuse out of the box, plug and play, that you can auto-wire using Spring. And then take example, mock MQ, like people who use MQ must understand the pain of it. For example, we get a lot of timeout exceptions when we use MQ in our F test. And mock MQ is there to solve the same so that you can focus on your code, not testing. And the similar, the other names are also pretty that you have heard about. And I request you to go check out this core module, Loki core. This is where you would find all those adapters. They have Java docs, and there should be, and there's a demo shelf as well where you can find this in action. Awesome. So, and there's a off-core library as well for companion for Loki. I'm going to talk about what that does. There is more to it. So we have achieved like 90% test coverage with Loki organically without using any tools like PowerMock, etc. And these are all the perks that we have. And the one I want to highlight is to write transparent and declarative tests, because we are solving this problem using vanilla design patterns. There is no magic involved in this. So that's the reason where you get easy and transparent, easy to maintain tests. And there is more to it. There is something called a dud layer, and I think you can figure out from the figure what it does. It just simulates the UDB. It's an in-memory layer, and all it does is it gives the power to fake adapters that they're really interacting with the DB. So your domain logic doesn't actually know whether it's interacting with real DB or a dud layer. So that gives rise to a great practice that we again followed called Blackbox unit testing, where you don't have to really have any of these anti-patterns. So when you have something like the run-in statement, you sort of are latching and pinning the test to that particular line of code, which sort of locks it, and you can't be able to move around. With this black box unit testing, you should be writing tests for the behavior. So as long as the component behavior doesn't change, no matter how much you refactor, the test is relevant. So that is the concept of black box unit testing that we have been following, and this has been working wonders for us. Because we believe unit test is not testing internals, but unit testing is end-to-end test for a component that you're actually testing. That brings me to another debate that we keep having, that I keep observing, where we replace a lot of unit tests with F tests, because FS sort of graze a lot more code. They give easy coverage, and that may be the reason some teams even totally skip unit tests and depend on only F tests. But this is what I believe in, and this is what even folks say that F test should test features, and unit test should be used to test the component behavior. So the problem is, as you use F tests for everything, we all know how costly F tests are. They're costly to write, they're costly to maintain, and before every check-in, if you have to sort of run all these tests, that sort of it's a nightmare for a developer. They either end up not even running and then breaking, and that sort of creates a traffic jam issue. So, and to add to that, because they're F tests, we sort of don't focus on those good practices. We see them as chores, and we sort of it's fine that we sort of just check in with not as much emphasis on coding practices as they have on prod. So the result is the test code becoming more complex than the prod code, and that haunting us back as test failures. And I've seen my own team spending a lot of time on fixing tests rather than working on something like a business that adds business value, because some tests are such notorious tests which sort of eat up a lot of time because they're so complex. And add to this, we have a multiverse of tests in our revenue cloud, and I'm sure other clouds also can relate to it, like end-to-end tests, F-tests, Postman, but of course the large guy is an outlier. Postman is not actually automation, but it's a Salesforce segmented way to manually test an API. And we at Revenue Cloud also invested so much into it. We bought a lot of licenses, and then we maintain something called a super collection of our persona-based API flows, which we call Supernova. Which we keep on sort of maintaining every release, and we use them extensively for manual testing as well as cross-team RF blitz. But that's it. All this valuable information, those templates, having that information of persona-based flows are wasted only for manual testing. We saw more potential to it, and the idea is, what if you can use your Postman templates to write your F tests and E2E tests? What if there is a tool to bridge that gap between the manual testing and automation world? That gave rise to RevoMan. So RevoMan, also called RevWoman. So this is a tool that we recently launched, which sort of something called template-driven testing. So all it does is it consumes those Postman templates and prepares F test for you. So you sort of can plug this into any F test and then give it as your Postman collection as input, and that runs all the collection for you. Let me briefly show how it happens. So it has an in-memory layer again, and it takes into the environment JSON file and creates an in-memory environment, and then uses that to replace those Postman variables within the templates, and then uses that to request response. And then from there, it executes the Post.js scripts as well. It has a JS engine to run on JVM, and it takes care of running those test scripts that you have in your Postman. And then we update the in-memory environment. And then we have emphasis on type safety because we are writing this in JVM and not JavaScript. We wanted to convert that response back into strong types so that we can execute some validations on top of it. And we have used some advanced JSON libraries for this, like Moshi, to convert any legacy component or any unmarshal, any response to any legacy object that you have in code. And we took another approach, a novel approach for validations. We used our own in-house tool called Vader. It's totally open source. I request you to explore more going to this URL. And this entire cycle runs until all the steps are done, and you will be getting this output back, which gives you an entire rundown of all your steps, all the request response data and everything. So you can even use this data, write more validations on top of it if you like. And all of this can be triggered with a simple function call, an API call. This is how simple it looks like. It's a rev up and it expects a configuration. Let's check out how to build this configuration. Again, it's a build a pattern. So you start with this, and then this is how you provide your collection JSON file that you export from your Postman. And this is how you provide your environment file. This is how you can provide any dynamic environment on top of it, which you might only know during runtime. Like, for example, if you're using that through F-test, maybe the username password of the org, which the F-test pins, you might only know at the runtime, and then you can pass that as a dynamic environment variable. And then here is how you can, for all those strong types that you're interested and you're thinking to validate, this is how you can plug them into RevoMan so that as it gets a response, RevoMan tries to unmarshal them into the strong POJOs. And this is how you can write the validations on top of it. As I said, this is Vader coming from Vader. This is we call it config-driven validation. Again, this is again, this is developed with Salesforce APIs and Salesforce responses in mind. So please do check it out. And that's it. So an end-to-end test in a single slide. How awesome is it? Just think about the kind of effort that you might need to write something like this, and now you just squeezed into a single slide. There's the amount of saving, and honestly speaking, there is no code in here. It's all a configuration and combined with all the JSON data that you have. So that is it. So so this reduces a lot of cognitive complexity when it comes to writing tests. Your tests become so simple, and a very interesting side effect that is you can maintain all those Postman templates with your coverage itself, which will live with your coverage and die with your code, of course. So similar to a unit test, how awesome is it? Like for any blitz or unit tests, they always stay up to date. Otherwise, you gotta make sure they're up to date. So you can use that for blitzing or whatever, and you don't really have to exchange your JSON files when it's time for blitz at the end of the release. And it doesn't have to limit itself being Postman. Riverman can actually evolve independently. It can support more use cases that are relevant to Salesforce as well as outside world, like supporting of more other format of templates like Kaiju templates, which are very similar to Postman, and even support asynchronous operations. And we also want to support some pluggable parametric templates. For example, the variables in Postman, like the random date, etc. You can even, we wanted to give a support to consumers to provide their own functions so they can generate that random data if that is not coming from Postman. So this is where you can find this in action again, and the basal coordinates. And this is again a repo, a separate off-code repo. And we have plans to open sources as well this year. So this is totally built with open source components. And we always believe that any code or library can improve only when it's adopted more. And I would love to see that adoption coming from you guys. And please challenge us with your requirements. If something is not addressed, we'd love to go and adapt on, I mean, implement it. And then I would love to see more contributions as well, because they're open source. Anybody can come in, contribute, and then extend that based on their requirements. And please drop into this channel. We would love to provide a one-to-one support for anybody who is interested in consuming or collaborating and contributing. I just want to finish it with a slight tweaking in that what Lincoln said. If you only have 4 hours, don't waste time sharpening your axe. Instead, use an electric chainsaw so that you can chop more. And on the same note, it's beautiful to see tests and trees green. Please don't chop trees and plant one if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gopal. Now you can see the code which you can give for Gopal as a feedback for the Gopal. Please use the code to type in your quest and then take it from there. Now we have the Q&A time. Please use this time to ask any questions you have. We can take at least 2 or 3 questions, and as we have 7 more minutes.
Anyone, any questions? Or do you see any use cases similar that you can sort of adopt to your teams? I'd love to hear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I saw in one of the slides that you showed port and to mock fake adapters, mock adapters. How are they different from any general mocking that we do for any external port or any black box testing?
Yeah, so actually mocking with Mockito is still fine, but what happens is when we have legacy component with static calls, similar to, let us say, a db.save or something. So they are not tamed by Mockito. You can't just mock them because that would throw a lot of exceptions. You're supposed to use byte manipulation code like PowerMock. So what we're trying to do is wrap on top of it. Like, for example, if there's a static method, static call, we would have an interface. Within that method, we'll be, of course, calling that legacy component. Now, what happens is we are wrapping that legacy with something more modern, which can be faked or mocked. So that is how it solves a problem of not required to use that legacy components. And now that you're sort of adapting this architectural pattern, you'll also be forced to think in terms of injecting your dependencies rather than directly calling that static call. So that way, in two ways, because it's clean code and you're also using this new modern adapter, that's also issue of not using that power mock. And and another added value is all of these reusable adapters are coming out of the box from Nokia. So that's one of the reasons why you should you can use it. Yeah.
So, I mean, fantastic tools. Looks like a lot of time is saved, and obviously, folks can focus on creating the next big features and focus on strategy stuff. So, this is just my second week in Salesforce. So I got to know when I came to this conference. What's like the beginner's guide? Is there a place? Or is there like training videos? And how do people get to know about all these fantastic tools to give this?
If you're talking specific to these tools, we have so many videos and documentation. We are improving as we go. And like I said, you can drop onto our Revenue Delphinus channel, which is public, or you can ping me as well. I can guide you to a lot of Java docs and documents that we prepare. And like I said, we can even give one-to-one support until we have very good documentation. So yeah, we are. There is no. I mean, it shouldn't be blocked because there is no guidance for sure. We would have to give one-to-one support, and we'll be publishing more docs as well.
Excellent presentation. Thank you, Gopal.
Thank you.
Any more questions, guys?
Thank you.
I assume we don't have any questions more. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gopal, for your time. And it was an awesome presentation. As a token of appreciation, please don't go. Just stay back from TMP as a token of appreciation. As this is a silent conference, I expect you to clap so that at least we can hear outside. Thank you.